Okay, let's look at tracking these air fresheners. We're going to pull the logo out of the front here, and then we're going to change the text from black ice to something else here. Not only do we have a lot of camera movement, but we also have a lot of object movement. On top of that, we also have a lot of lighting change coming from the keys over here. So we're going to use a couple different techniques today to solve that. So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to pick a service tracker here. So let's bring a service tracker in. Okay, feed that in. I'm going to go to the very first frame, and then I'm going to select just outside of this main air freshener here that we want to track. Just a little bit outside the edges. We're gonna go to mesh. I'm gonna keep the standard mesh options. I'm not gonna change any of the points. Then go to track, and then I'm going to bring up the mesh rigidity to about let's call it 0.82, and then switch this to better. And then I'm not going to touch anything else. I'm going to just go ahead and track forwards. Okay, my tracking's done now, and it is sticking pretty well, and I don't see a lot of actual deformation because we turned the rigidity up. Okay, so from there, I'm going to go to the result, and I'm going to change this from warp input 2 onto 1 into stabilize warp onto 1. So now we should have a very stable version of our footage here. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start painting some of this out. So we're going to use a paint node. Okay, send that to your viewer. Select the stroke tool. And then I'm just going to go to the very first frame. We're going to click clone. And then in the stroke controls, just as a good habit, I set this to be longer than I need it to be in your stroke duration. And then we're going to start painting things out here. The big problem we're going to have is a lot of this changing light, right? Like we have, not only do we have texture, but we also have this shadow cascading back and forth. And you can see it's moving, it's very linear. It's essentially it's the keys from the left. So what we have here is a line going top to bottom, and it's moving left to right. So to keep things uniform, we're going to work on cloning only from directly above, laterally up and laterally down. We're not going to try to clone something from over here to paint it over here. So that should keep our shadow consistent as we paint over it. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with an easy one. I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to source from down here. And I'm just going to paint out the R copy right here. Then play this through. See, we're getting a little bit of that where you can see the light. It's light right here, but I sourced from a shadow spot. So I'm actually going to source from right here, and then I'm going to paint back over that. Okay, so now it's moving across it a little bit more uniformly now. So we're going to do the same thing. It's going to be a lot of back and forth. Pick something directly above it, and you go straight down, and then we're going to start painting across. Go directly above it, paint across. And then you want to meet in the middle. You don't want to keep cloning top down. So I'm going to clone down a little bit, and then I'm going to go below and then start cloning back up. And then we can go and check our work a little bit and see what it's doing there. It's not terrible yet. Let's get through this now. Okay, so for the most part, that has removed everything. It's not bad, but there are a couple things here that are still kind of standing out. I'm seeing kind of this area where you have a lot of brightness and then this dark kind of slashes through. So I like doing like this second pass where I'm going to make my brush really big, and then I'm going to turn the opacity down. And then I'm going to source a bright area here and then go over this darker area. And then that should hopefully ease up a lot of those rougher transitions there. See, already that looks much better. I have an area here where it's kind of a dark line coming into this brighter patch, so I'm going to source down here and then just lighten that up a bit. And then it kind of pulls out a lot of the clone patching feel you might get from something like this, from having to copy a lot of this texture. So that's going to work for us for right now. We have a shadow kind of casting through. It's not overly clone stampy. And then hopefully whatever we're putting back on top of this is will hide kind of any sins that are left over from paintouts. Okay, so that's not bad. So at this point, let's handle just getting our new paint out back over our original footage with it unstabilized. So I'm just going to take my surface tracker here, copy it and paste it below. You want to make sure you want to go into the green input. And then you take your original footage and pipe it into the yellow input. And then bring this over and make sure you're going to change this from stabilize warp into rewarp stabilize clip. And then we want to be able to isolate this because right now we just have our footage being piped back into our footage after it's been unstabilized, and we want to be able to have a little bit more control. So we're going to create a mat for just the paint out that we're working on. So we're going to do that by taking the first surface tracker, you're going to copy it, paste it to the side, add your footage to it, and then we're going to change it from stabilize warp to create mesh alpha mask. This will give us a mask. And then below our surface tracker, we're going to create a matte control. And then pipe our surface tracker in, holding Alt, create a garbage matte. And then garbage matte, you want to make sure you invert it. So now we have a perfect isolation of our paint out with the motion re-added back to it. So now we can create a merge node and bring our original footage back into it. And then re-add our paint out back on top of that. So now we have a solid base to start working off of. The original logo and branding has been removed. And now we have room to add whatever we want now. So with that, I'm going to make a little bit of room here. If you think about this in sections, we have our stabilize, we have paint out, and then we're undoing that work here. And then this is creating the cutout for it. So anything we add in this section now is going to just be attached to what we tracked. So I'm going to bring a graphic in here. Okay, here's my graphic. Just a fix and post logo, and I'm just going to merge this over our paint. You can see that, and then we are going to want to scale and size it. So I'm going to add a transform after the logo and scale it down, find the right spot for it, and then in our merge node, I'm going to set this to overlay, and then I'm going to set the blend to about 0.7, so it'll be a little bit faded, and then we're going to refine that a little bit more right now. I just want to do a couple things here. So already we can tell it's very sharp compared to what we're attaching it to. So let's start adding some blur. So we're going to add one blur, and then if you hit F2, we're just going to rename this and call it base blur. And then that's feeling like too much right away, so I'm just going to go 0.8. We're going to get a little bit more texture in here using texture from the image after the paint out. So I'm going to add a color corrector node, and I'm going to make a little room. I'm going to pipe the color corrector node off of the paint. And then in here, I'm going to turn the saturation down, and then I'm going to turn the contrast up. I'm getting about 1.4. I'm just going to round it up to 1.4. Okay. And then from there, I'm going to use that essentially as a Luma matte into the merge node that we have our graphic coming into. And then so in the merge, we're going to go to settings and change the masking channel from alpha to luminance. And then I'm going to change the highs and lows to compress the black and white image we just made coming in off of our color corrector. So I'm going to set the low to about 0.16, and then I'm going to set the high to 0.5. And then when we hit play, you can see what it's doing here. It's taking on a lot of the shadows and lighting from the footage. So this is going to help with some integration, but it's doing the reverse of what we want right now. So make sure you go into your merge and then hit the checkbox for apply mask inverted. So now we kind of have some light interaction happening with the graphic that we added on. So let's look at our composite as it is right now. We've got a pretty solid track. We have some really nice light interaction. The original logo has been removed and we can't see that anymore. So we've got a really strong base so far. The next thing we are going to start working on is changing the text at the bottom from black ice to something else. So we're going to add new text into that. So to do that, if we have our graphic, we're going to create a planar tracker, and then we're going to take our footage, pipe it into planar tracker. I'm going to go to the very first frame, and then I'm going to draw around this whole bottom part so that it grabs what we want to track. I'm going to hit R, G, and B on the keyboard, and this is going to show me different color channels to see if there's more contrast in one that might be better to track in. And it looks like the red channel has more contrast. So I'm going to go with our tracker selected. Reference time is set to 0 because we're on the very first frame. I'm going to change perspective to shear, and then I'm going to change the track channel from Luma to the red channel, and then track forwards. And then change the operation mode from track to steady. And so we can now see our footage it's locked in place. So this is perfect. So next we're going to do is create a background layer. And this is just going to be a plain solid, and we're going to sample some of the white that's in here. We're going to merge it over the planar tracker. And then go to the very first frame. And then we're actually going to create a polygon, and then just drop a polygon in the same shape as the white box here. Pipe that in as a mask to the merge. And so that automatically gets rid of what we already had there. So now we kind of have this clean slate. On the polygon, just go to it and add a little bit of soft edge there. Not too much because you don't want to go outside the original bounds. Perfect. So now we can take our planar tracker. You want to copy it, paste it. You're going to make sure you hit invert steady transform, pipe footage in. And then at the end of your node flow here, add a new merge node. And then something's not going to look right away, and I'll show you. So we pipe it in. So now at the end of our node, we have our new paint out here, but we actually lost all the work that we have over here of the original logo if we go up a node. And that is because we did not do the same thing where we isolated our paint out work. We didn't do that here. So we have our footage coming in and we have our footage going back out. So there is no mask for this. So what we can do is we can actually add a matte control and take the same polygon mask and pipe it in as a garbage mask. And then make sure you invert it. And now we have an isolated version of what we're changing on this track. And so we check our final track. We now have a nice masked out texture. And the next thing I'm seeing is it doesn't look blurry enough because there's a lot of movement here. So in our planar tracker, we have a lot of movement that it's undoing. We can go into the settings and add motion blur. And then I'm just going to add this to 12. You can go higher when you're ready to render. But just doing that adds a bit more detail to the motion you can see there. So perfect. It's looking pretty good so far. So now everything in between here, we can start adding some stuff. So I'm going to add some text with the text plus node. I'm going to take that, pipe that in here, and merge it over. And then in the text, I'm just going to type in fixed. Change this to like rubato. And then you can just take it and move it down here. I'm going to go back to our original footage. This is what our text would look like here. So I'm going to take the text color and sample the black that is inside there, which is not a perfect black, and that's why. I'm going to take whatever color would be there. So if I go back to my merge, I now have this kind of like off green, and that's fine because that is going to look more accurate to what would be there. So go to our text and we're going to scale it down. And the next thing you can tell is it's not angled the way it needs to be. So find the right size of your text. So I'm gonna go to my layout and we have our rotation tools here. So I'm gonna take the Z and I'm gonna rotate it to find the right angle it needs to be. And what we can do is we can actually see this perspective line and try to match it to that. We have two lines that are telling us perfectly what perspective should be. So let's try to match to that. Go there. And then we have our Y. Our Y is this back and forth. So let's find that, something like that. And then on our X, we can tilt it down. It definitely needs to be tilted down. We can see it flipping backwards and forwards. So let's tilt it down. And then I think we can actually just go back to our scale, scale this up a bit bigger, move it down. And then in layouts, let's keep fine tuning this here. Something like that should work. You can spend more time on that getting it perfect, but yeah, so let's just see what that looks like at the end of our merge flow. See, all that motion blur really adds a lot to it. Cool, yeah, so we have new text in here, got this comped in. I just missed something here. I think on our text there should be a blur node here. You can add a blurred, and honestly keeping at 1 is totally fine, maybe even 0.8 on the blur node. It's looking really solid so far. The only thing I think we need to change is this is looking just a little bit too perfect. Like when I grab a frame here, it's just always crisp. So even at that, you can see like even fixed is moved because it's taking the motion from it. This doesn't really have that. So something we can do is we can go up to our graphic here and we're going to add a new blur layer. And I'm going to call this animated blur. You can see what it's doing by turning it on and off. Get a bit closer here. It's making it a bit softer. Let's say we have this set to 4. There we go. That's kind of muddying it up a bit. We don't want it to be that blurry all the time. We're going to use this to actually simulate it moving in and out of depth of field. So we're going to bring another polygon in. And then I'm going to bring 2 viewers up here. And then I'm going to send this blur down here. And then I'm just going to draw a very diagonal line box here with our polygon, add it to the animated blur. And we can see it now has the blur happening in between it. So I want to invert that and add a feather. So now we kind of have this like depth of field mask that we can now animate by hand as this starts moving. So just by having your polygon created, it's going to create a keyframe. Let's go to the very first frame and try to determine where focus should be. We can see a lot of this is sharp on the black, but then it softens up over here. So we can actually just take our whole mask here and say, let's put focus over here. And then as it slides forward in footage, it's really sharp over here, which means we want to move this so that focus is moved now to the left of it. And it's now starting to blur this. So we're just going to do this every couple frames. Every time you feel like it's made a big enough shift there, you can see like this is kind of too crisp and perfect here. So that means it must be missing focus completely, and that's where we can take this and move it completely off of it. But then it'll come back in right there. So now we grab this, grab it again, and just remember that whatever's inside the box is the sliver of focus. So don't pay attention to here because this isn't the true position of your mask. Your true position of your mask is here. Just using this as reference. So we can actually go in here and turn off show controls, and so we don't have to worry about that. And so we're only moving our mask here. And you can see that like focus pull there. A couple more frames. See, it's shifted back over a little bit. This looks well where it's at. Hit a keyframe to keep it there. And now it looks like it should move away again. A lot of this is just kind of doing it by eye because there's no real mathematical equivalent that's going to get you this right. It's just what, got to find what looks right to you. Cool. Okay, let's see what that looks like. All finished now. Zoom in here. So yeah, we have a pretty solid track here. We have a track, we have integration, we have some handheld blur that we've added in for further integration, but this is a pretty solid work here for just the power of really 2 nodes, a surface tracker and a planar tracker. And then some hand compositing in between there. Okay, let's look over our node flow here. So we have our original footage. What we did was we piped it into a surface tracker where we tracked it and stabilized it. And then we did some manual painting to remove any of the logos that were there originally, and then allowed us to keep a lot of the natural lighting that was already happening to it. And then we took a logo and we took a logo, scaled it down to where we wanted it to be. And then we added some custom blurring to match the depth of field that it would be on the shot. And then we used the newly painted out work that we've done as an actual Luma matte so that we can add more texture back into our composite as it takes on a lot of the lighting and the shadows that are coming through. And then we took our surface tracker and then duplicated it and then unwarped it so that we got all the camera movement back on. And then we used another version of another instance of the surface tracker. And then used that to create a matte and then sent that to the matte control. So now that we have our composite isolated, and we merged that back over our original footage. And then we went back up and piped our footage back into a planar tracker where we were able to just bring in a solid to get rid of the original text after the planar tracker was stabilized. We added our own text. So yeah, our text comes in, and then we did the same thing where we isolated our work, and then we took our planar tracker and then copy and pasted it below, and then inverted the track so that it got our composite moving again, and then we put that at the end of our node flow, and that is all the work that we have just now done.